architect. Her name is Cathy Purple Cherry. Cathy Purple Cherry is unfailing in her events to positively impact those around her. In addition to being an accomplished architect with numerous awards and publications, Cathy is also a wife and mother of 3, including 1 child with special needs. Cathy understands the desire for a dream home that is not only beautiful, but which also supports the values and needs of her clients. Purple Cherry Architects, Cathy's namesake firm, embraces advanced technologies and new materials in their custom designs for luxury residential architecture. The mission of Purple Cherry Architects is to serve their clients by listening to their needs and creating functional and nurturing spaces in which people can live, learn, work, and socialize. While she revels in the intricate design opportunities presented by high-end residential architecture, Cathy is equally passionate about her philanthropic efforts. Nowhere is this more notable than in the special needs community. Cathy and her firm offer their design knowledge and sensitivity to members of this community via the Purple Cherry Purposeful Architecture Studio. Purposeful Architecture's work addresses the dynamic challenges that a person with a disability faces on a daily basis. While they realistically accept an individual's disability, they believe those limitations should never be allowed to restrict an individual's progress toward personal independence. Their architecture is designed so these individuals can feel safe and motivated to engage in a learning and living environment that truly belongs to them. Today, Cathy will share with us her perspective on the evolution of the collaboration between the residential building architect and the landscape architect. Please help me welcome Cathy Purple Cherry.
Okay, first, can you guys hear me? Is this mic on? Is it on? Can you hear me? Are you okay? No, we're not using that one. Okay. So first, I'll give you a little bit of history. I know some faces in the room. It's nice to see you all again. It's nice to meet all of you. So first, Purple was my maiden name, so you know the history, and I married my Cherry 44 years ago. So the reason it became Catherine Purple Cherry was because I was in a male-dominated city, Annapolis, back 40 years ago, and I needed the city to know that it was a female-driven firm, so it used to be Catherine Purple Cherry Architects. But I also knew I was going to grow the firm and grow its region. So it was probably 15, 18 years ago that I dropped Catherine and slid it over into Purple Cherry. Intentionally, because I can't have it branded around an individual, because my goal is transition. So I have approximately 38 people in the firm. We have 5 offices, 2 of them are unmanned, 3 of them are manned. 8 people are down in our Charlottesville office. 2 people are in our New York Soho office that just literally opened. And the entire rest of the team is obviously in Annapolis. What is true about our team, just so you guys know, we have been a Revit firm, the landscape architects in the room, we have been a Revit firm for 23 years. We went into it 2 years after it came out. It was probably the best thing we did in terms of how we have now built our parametric library, which has contributed to how we do our work. Because while we compete with the very, very high-end professionals, we do not bill at the very, very high end of professional fees. That is not who we are as a team. So now for 2 seconds go to the purposeful work for a moment in time. So from a purposeful standpoint, my brother was Down syndrome and lived to the age of 58. He's no longer with us. And my son, my first oldest child, is adopted from a Russian orphanage up near the Baltic Sea at the age of 3.5. He is the child who would have destroyed most marriages. But what it did for me is it probably made me the advocate that you never want to sit across the table from. Because if you do, I will win at that argument. So I literally went through this whole journey of reading all of the laws, obviously, that are related to special needs services and funding. Ultimately served for 7 years on the National Autism Society board, so I really know how the money and income streams follows through. To this day, I still have conversations with strangers that are sent to me, not as a professional standpoint, but as a courtesy, who don't know how to go through these processes. So I now have a 32-year-old, fully funded, high-functioning autism child in a group home, and his annual funding amount for everybody here is $267,000 that takes care of him through the state. He is a child that obviously typically would not have gotten that kind of funding because it has to do with the limit of his disability, but I do know how to go through those funding streams. He's a very complicated child. Okay, so I was asked, I have to look at the wall. I was asked to talk about what is the collaboration between architects and interior designers, or what is the best way that, not interior designers, I'm sorry, architects and landscape architects. And this slide is not meant to present anything to you guys. This slide is a series of little bullet points to remind me of what the hell to talk about. Got it? That's the way I work. I don't rehearse anything. We're going to talk about the relationship between the two of us. So the one other thing that is very true for my team, which is not always true for most teams, we talk about money from the very beginning. I have no interest in supporting my clients down a path to have them be angry at me, angry at my landscape architect, angry that the project can't be built because they want it to be $5 million and it's $7.5 million. This is something that notoriously happens in our profession all the time. And everybody's afraid to talk about money because obviously they're afraid to be held accountable for whatever the hell came out of their mouth, right? But the truth is, being the architect, I can broad stroke comments. So even though this isn't on this, and I might circle back on it, a perfect example of this conversation probably about a week and a half ago was, don't even start the landscape design until you've had a conversation with your client about what they perceive the budget of the landscape design is. There are so many clients that are clueless that on a 10,000 square foot home you can spend anywhere from $400,000 to $1.8 million in your landscape work. And many times I've sat with landscape architects that have presented this fantastic master plan, and then they budget it into chunks and it comes back at $1.6 million, and the client is floored. Thank God it's in the master planning process, because at least it's still small sketch on paper with numbers. The challenge is, I think it's really important with every client. I don't care if my client is a $30 million client or my client is a $4 million client. The question is, what are your expectations and what kind of number do you hope to set? As Chris knows well from Cathy Cherry, I don't live in the world of my clients. I have a beautiful piece of property in Charlottesville because of the view. But I'm not the person who put in any irrigation. I have no site lighting. I'm not the girl who wakes up and goes, oh yeah, hell, I can spend $250,000 on my landscaping. Because I can't. I'm no different than everybody else in this room who has worked hard in this profession, has grown in this profession, but because of the way we do business, Cathy's not my client. I don't have the same financial means as my clients do. But every client, no matter how wealthy that client is, wants to have that knowledge and conversation about cost, because they don't know what it means. I have certainly seen landscape architects and interior designers get fired, lose their jobs, let go, because of not having these conversations. So I got off tangent for 2 seconds. So let's kind of go and let's see if I can get prompted. This is obviously a beautiful compound. It's the largest project we've ever done. It was $32 million over 5 years, 9 structures. We completed all architecture, interior design, furnishings, all purchases of all furnishings, all tile work, all light fixtures, everything on this project for 3.5% fee. Because we don't tie to percentage of cost of construction. We tie to the time that it takes us to do the work. Got it? So I have a team that is very efficient, and I have read it with a 23-year parametric library that has been custom built. My competition is 15 to 22% of the cost of construction. Got it? Okay, so that's kind of who we are and why we do work the way we do it. I see myself no different, so that you guys know. than an attorney or than an accountant, right? I'm a professional, I'm degreed, and I have an hourly rate. The only thing I pray is, I always say, Chris, I say, before I die, I better be the same rate as the high attorneys. The challenge in the architectural world in this country is that architects are not really understood in the residential level. And when you're doing local residential work, what happens is, and it's an innocent thing, it's the way the United States see the profession of architecture, whereas if you were in Spain, an architect is seen no different than a doctor. They are held at a very, very high level. But in this country, landscape architects probably are not seen at all in the same way. So there's this perception, I can go off and get my house drawn for $15,000. I can go off and get my house drawn for $30,000. And so that's what you always fight in this profession, because there are some people that don't understand the value, particularly restaurant owners. Just going to table that there. Restaurant owners, very cheap, but they did the last 3 restaurants themselves, you know. Okay, so let's see what the first one is. The evolution, why then? This was kind of, I was told that I was going to talk about, what was my subject?
The collaboration between residential architects and landscape architects and how it has evolved in time.
And I also think there was something in there about evolution. So for some reason, when I thought about how has, like, you guys know this better than anybody. I do think that 35, 45 years ago, well, let me back up for 1 second. Please know that when your work gets really big, while you have wealthier clients, so we have probably 5 projects more than 15 million right now going on across the country, and we generally run about 85 projects a year, to give you an idea of how much work we're doing. And our project, the furthest west right now is Kansas, the furthest north is up in the Boston area, the furthest south is in Palm Beach, so, and it's kind of triangulated through there with Ohio and North Carolina, and obviously where you all are right now. Who's my team that's at Deadman's who's my team, raise your hand, who's at Deadman's on a...
So it's Elmer, Vic.
Elmer, where's my team?
Where's Elmer?
Are they over here?
Elmer's here.
So this is at, you've been there, right? Elmer, beautiful property. Kind of mind-blowing. It's like a $20+ million estate sitting in the middle of nowhere at Warm Springs. He is the owner of the Greenbrier. Oh no, there we go. He's the owner of Pine. So he's obviously comes from wealth. It is not accurate to assume that wealthy clients want to spend a lot of money. I'm not speaking about that client now. That's a gracious, fantastic client. But you can also have a client who wants to spend $20 million and still thinks that he can tighten everything. So it doesn't matter how much money they have. It's all down to the personality. Okay. So when I think about way back 30 years ago, 35 years ago, landscape architects and architects versus today, and what do I feel has changed? Now I'm only going to speak from the residential side, not the commercial side, although I've done plenty of commercial projects in my career, and we continue to do them. Most significantly, we do nonprofit work. It happens to be a heart of my firm and therefore a heart of my team. I would say the biggest difference to me, obviously, number one is technology. 30+ years ago, we didn't have the technology and the integration that we could do between the two parties in terms of design. And by the way, mind-blowingly, as we're all terrified, AI is going to change this again. Okay? Got it? Everybody understand that too. It's a little creepy, isn't it? Okay. Although we just discovered a fantastic way to use it. I worry about AI because I worry about ownership and who's the creator of the design. But I don't worry about AI from a rendering standpoint. So this particular project, going back for a second, this was Cathy and her Ruby. Okay? So you guys know Cathy and her Ruby. I do a lot of work with Cathy and her Ruby. But I'll give you all the tricks to slip in. Which you're going to hear as I keep going, about the things that become the pet peeves or not, right? Okay. I wouldn't ever want to throw them under a bus. But I will tell you things that are important to us as a team. So first, when I was thinking about the evolutions, I certainly think that the world of landscaping has changed from what you would originally have thought in the 1980s and 90s as showcasing a home, a lot of uplighting with a lot of strong lighting on the building, a lot of very structured landscape that is not necessarily natural to its environment. And obviously it's now a completely different thing. It's how do I plant things so I don't have to take care of them so they still look beautiful but they can grow. And a lot, so to me, that's what I see as the biggest change in residential. And then I think the second biggest change is, and it's probably, guys, it's probably not necessarily tied to the years, it's probably tied to the change in scale of projects. So you've got to remember, when you start a company, I was one person at a 1,000 square foot house with 10 dogs, 3 cats, 2 children, a third one on the way, and my first 3 employees worked in that 1,000 square foot home with me. And I would never have my client come to that 1,000 square foot home. And that was how I started the company. It was me. My first project was a porch up in Severna Park. Right? But it took 30 years of working 80 to 100 hours a week, waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning while my children were sleeping, doing whatever I could do from 3 to 6, serving on 7 different boards in my career in order to grow a company. So that's true. The company now has, with its team, about 9 people that want to buy the company, transition into leadership, and they've been being groomed, so that's an effort that's going on, because I am 64 years old. Okay, so I think as work gets bigger, the blessing is you absolutely want to be thinking about your architecture, your interior design, and your landscape architecture, ideally at the beginning, because it's the best outcome. So we're a big proponent of, we want to get a landscape architect on board, ideally within the first 2 months of a project, maybe 3 months. It's very difficult to do when you're working on a project that wants to be built for $3 million, and I'll explain why. Because you can't build much today for $3 million, sadly, which means none of us can afford a house, right? You can't. And sadly, a $3 million client for me is what I call a stretching client. Usually a $3 million client, they might be younger or not, they might be older, it doesn't matter. But what they're not is that they're stretching to $3 million. It's a little bit more sensitive. They're going to be more sensitive to, I can't spend $250,000 on landscape and hardscape. I can't do it. I'm just stretching. When projects to me get more than about $6 million, when you get into the 6, 7, 8, and forget the big ones, in the 6, 7, 8, then you can start to have those conversations and naturally say we need a landscape architect on early, let's get them on board. Because to give you an idea, guys, I don't know that all of you guys know this, but landscape architects aren't cheap either. Architects aren't cheap, landscape architects aren't cheap. And so clients are a little bit surprised when they discover that, oh my gosh, the landscape architect fee is X. And it's not that landscape architects are getting rich, trust me, they're not. But for a client, it's a lot of money. That's the main thing, okay? It's just, again, the diminishing, it's kind of the way this country has raised our profession in quality. If you were in Europe, you'd be much higher level in terms of how you're thought about it. It's just the way the country sees architects and design profession. Okay. Now I see, obviously, a lot of self-sustaining materials, which is fantastic, and that early integration collaboration that's happening. And it especially is happening for us because obviously when we finish this big $32 million compound, we have become very well known for what I'll call multiple structure compounds. And when you have a multiple structure compound, there's no question I want a landscape architect on at the beginning. Because that master plan of that site to me is very important to have landscape architect design. Now, if you ask Kevin Cathy sitting over here or anybody else who's worked with me, you're damn straight I have an opinion. Okay? But I am going to say something. I don't have an ego. The reason I have an opinion, thank you, Kevin, for shaking your head, and we're going to get to the ego part in a minute, is because I've raised 3 children, I'm a woman, I currently have 5 dogs, 5 ferrets, and 2 cats, because my daughter works at the SPCA. But I've also, pre-children, had 10 dogs, 3 cats, all at the same time. And my husband is 73 years old, raised on a tobacco farm, big hunter. So I kind of know how to do everything, but I've grown into that, okay? And I think that when you're doing a big compound, the beauty of the vision of what a landscape architect had written, now it's my job to make beautiful buildings, and it's my job to communicate with the landscape architect in dialogue about the things that I think are important. And you've got to know the things that are important to me, most significantly, I think, other than anything else, is really how you support children. So I probably have a stronger opinion when we're dealing with pools, connectivity to pools, visual connectivity to pools between the inside and out. Here's why. My brother drowned at the age of 3 in the backyard. So do you think I care about how I see from the water to me inside? I do. Now that was a long time ago, and I know everybody feels bad about that, and I did too back then. But it is in fact the very thing that has informed why I feel the way I feel. And every single client that I am with, I have the conversation, because I struggle when pools get disconnected. I don't struggle if the disconnected pool is isolated in its own safety piece. Let's put a fence around it, whether you need a fence or not. Then I don't think it's entertaining. It's a destination. We're not really having a good party. But I do care very much about the way mothers see children within their spaces, regardless of what that is, circulating to the bus stop, circulating to wherever it is that they're going to go. I always want those eyes on. Okay, so let's go to what the first thing is, the early strategic discussions. Okay, I do want to share this. I do think there's a little bit of a miss in the landscape architects. Shouldn't have said it, but I will. I think it's very important for you guys not to be hoodwinked by an architect, to think that what an architect thinks can happen, and therefore support them in a pretty picture. I can't tell you how many times, maybe 4, where a master planning thing has been done for another architect that was been then advertised with the real estate agent to try to sell a piece of property, and nothing drawn technically can be done, because they paid no attention to the zoning codes. So that's probably my biggest problem that I have, which is I think landscape architects need to take, not your landscape professionals, but landscape architects first, need to know their jurisdiction. I don't think any project should ever be started. We don't start projects without extensive knowledge of what all of our overlays are, what we can and cannot do, most significantly in the critical area, which is this state, which you'd be horrified by some of the overlays that are up in Long Island. So, I think that landscape architects need to own zoning in the same way that architects own zoning, okay? Because you can have an architect who hasn't done the research on the zoning. I've certainly seen a project in Bay Ridge in which the architect was from out of state and had no clue what they could and couldn't do in the critical area and designed a house. I've seen an architect up in Rehoboth design 2 full houses for a client. Neither of them worked. This was an architect. This is an architect everybody knows. 2 full houses designed for a client. Neither of them could work under the zoning law. Finally got fired, hired us. We were done 6 months later, filed for a permit. You gotta do your rules and regulations. You gotta have your conversations with your local jurisdiction if you feel like there's anything right. You gotta get together and do that to know what you can and cannot do. So I feel really strongly. I love that you might perceive that you should rely on your architect. If you're working with me, you can rely on us. Lot coverage obviously is something. The critical area law, for those, you're all from our state, right? So the critical area law, who in this room knows Kelly Prinitz? Nobody? Few people. Okay, thank you. You know Kelly. Well, Kelly's been in her position for 40 years. I've worked for 30 years. I've worked with Kelly for 30 plus years. The interpretation in Anne Arundel County is an ever-changing thing. You know, 2 years ago, facade was a screen porch. Last week, facade is not a covered porch with a big triangulated piece of wall. It's still longer facade. So therefore, you've got to go back to principal structure. Yet, if you look at the building code, facade is any structure that's connected to the principal structure, elevated out of the ground more than 8 inches, and structurally connected. So if that's principal structure, then who is it for anybody at the county to define what's facade? Maddening to me. Because it went from 15 years ago, your closest point of any projection was your closest point for redevelopment to the water. Then it turned into, no, you gotta go to the facades. For 7 years they made a mistake at the county. They used the word facades with an S on the end of it. They had interpreted it wrong for 7 years, applied their decision at that time. Then finally they figured out at the Office of Law they had interpreted it wrong, so then they had to back up because now it's a single facade. And if I had a graphic, I could explain to you how this all plays out. But a lot of its strategy plays into when you're trying to get a pull on my landscape architects on a piece of property. So let me give you an idea. If you've got a reverse L-shaped house, you can't get a pool forward of a structure, but you can get a pool inside of that L. You might not want it inside of that L, but you might want it inside of that L before you tear that house down. And that's what we do. That's the strategic way we tackle every project. I hear real estate agents all the time say, you know, you can't cut any trees down in the critical area. That's wrong. That's not at all what the law says. Does everybody know what the law says about trees in the critical area? No? Okay. Does anybody know what trees? Okay, I'll explain to you what it says. From 0 mean high water to 100, it is the buffer. That's the no-go zone. You cannot go in the 0 to 100. Technically, you can. Because you're allowed to remove dead, dying, and invasive. And when you get in to get rid of dead, dying, and invasive, you actually end up backing out over a few more, right? So I've cleared the water of dead, dying, and invasive. I've cleared the waterfront of dead, dying, and invasive, and I've done it with a permit. This is important here. Every time it happens, it's done with a permit. But if I bring that dead, dying, and invasive with a permit into my grading permit, building permit process, it now moves to a different floor. So when a landscaper, not you guys, not a landscape architect, when a landscaper goes into the county for dead, dying, and invasive, whatever, take down these dead trees, he's not going through the department that has Kelly Credits in it. He's going through the department that is the second floor where the forester is there, etc. It's a different review. It doesn't mean that they're held to the exact same standards, but I will explain something that's the stormwater management bill that came in about 16 years ago. So he can get that permit out much easier for dead, dying, invasive. If it then pulls into my building permit and my grading permit, it becomes a part of the whole project development. It's reviewed with a different set of eyes, and it triggers ESD. Anybody know this? Okay, no. ESD is a component of the stormwater management bill that came along approximately 16 years ago. The bill is about this thick. The regulations of that stormwater management is really what changed when you think about seeing civil drawings. You used to see civil drawings in 3 or 4 sheets, and now you see civil drawings of much more. It was that stormwater management bill that changed that effort and kind of doubled the civil engineering fee, because they all of a sudden had all these other checklist requirements that had to be on all of their site plans. What happened is that stormwater management bill has language called environmentally sensitive design. If I have a lot with 1 tree in the middle of the lot, 1 tree in the middle of the lot, exactly where I want to put my house, because it's the best place for the view, let's pretend, smack in the middle. I can go with a subcontractor, I can get my tree guy to get a permit to take that tree down because it's behind the 100-foot. Watch the key. If it's between 100 and 1,000, I can get a tree down. No issue. I can take a tree down. No issue. They don't have any right to regulate me from 100 to back. The only thing they control me from 100 to back is how much I clear, which I'll go back on in a minute. I'll go back on that. But let's go back to the one tree in the middle of the lot. The one tree is considered environmental. If I go through the tree guys, they'll let me take it down. If I go through Kelly Krennis, it is an environmentally sensitive feature, and she will tell you that you can't remove it. Point blank, Kelly will sell, you can't remove that tree. And even though you're 200 feet from the water in the middle of your $2 million piece of property with $27,000 in property taxes, ESD gives her the authority to tell you you can't put the house where you want it. So what do? You take the tree down. That's what you do. Thankfully, Kelly knows that. And one time she was in front of a client, I said to a client, she said, well, I want to take this tree down. Kelly said, I didn't hear that. Because if I know that when you come in, I won't allow you to take that tree down. So let me go back to the other piece when I said from 100 to 1,000. It is accurate that you still don't want to get a permit. It is accurate that what you have to watch is whether this is whether it's disturbing less than 5,000 square feet to take tree and clearing down, or more than 5,000 square feet to take tree and clearing down, okay? Because if you go more than you're into a grading permit, it doesn't matter what it is, you can get a grading permit to take down trees and it'll trigger a count in your buffer management plan. So usually the process for us is first dead dotting invasive along the waterfront. If we have a lot of trees, second it's less than 5,000, and get the tree guy to get a permit to take down 4,999 trees. He might have to plant 10 trees and 8 shrubs, but he's doing it through the second floor. And then we come along with the project. Does that make sense? So while we're off doing our design, we are working with professionals and legal permits to do as much as we can in order to maximize whatever it is that our client wants. Okay? Okay. So then when I said, why did I say pieces? I wrote tree canopies because, oh gosh, this gets so tough right now. You guys may not be aware that when the stormwater management bill also came along, and you guys can jump in, but you don't just look at where a tree sits. You look at its canopy, which I'm sure you guys know. So you can have one of the hardest places is over at Fishing Creek, because they have a limitation to how much you can clear, and the civil engineer had to do was get into a discussion about, I don't have to clear a tree to put a driveway under its canopy, which is very different than just simply looking at vertical clearing. You don't have to clear a canopy to do development. So usually the way the county first looks at things is where you're clearing, but the argument of you're not clearing to get a driveway under a tree is an argument that the civil engineer has to have with the county as to when they're calculating up what their clearing disturbance is. Okay, when I wrote phases of work, why did I write that? Somebody remind me. I probably, let me think about this. I probably wrote it because I don't remember why. I'm 64. Okay, let's go to the next one. Early searching. The significance of early zoning research and building code analysis. So this I've kind of touched on already. Again, this is the compound of the $32 million project, okay? And so this is the multiple structures, and this is an aerial of the site. And let's think about this. So, again, back on that zoning research and building code analysis, that's probably got to be my number one thing is this is hard to say. It's easy to draw pretty. It's easy to draw pretty, whether you're architects or landscape architects. But you've got to know your rules and requirements before you start drawing pretty, or you've done a disservice to your client in spending money on something that may or may not be able to happen, right? Okay, I even touched on this one, understanding your client's budget. Can I ask, if somebody were to say to the landscapers, I'm looking at my landscapers, right? I've got teams back here. If somebody were to say in the residential world, what do you think is your rough range of budget that you typically get? 200 to 500? 500 to 1 million, 200 to 500. Right. And what's true is, and this sounds horrible, you don't get a lot for 200 to 500 on a large piece of property. Right now, you're using up 200,000 on the pool alone with its surround because of the way that COVID has increased pool costs from $80,000 to $150,000, and now you've got to get it to your surround. So 200 to 500 doesn't do much. And certainly there's no question that the more expensive a project is, the more efficient it is for you to do. We have efficiencies when we do bigger work versus when we do smaller work. I can only imagine that that's really true for landscape architects' design. Because doing a little $100,000 project, sometimes you don't even want to wake up for, because you're lucky if they value you enough to make any profit on that project, right? Kind of, yes? Okay, I shouldn't have said that. I'll contradict myself. I believe in all different professionals at all different layers doing all different costs, doing all different things, because not all of us can afford big. I believe in the guy who works out of his basement with no overhead and charges $20,000 to draw a house, because somebody's got to do it. So thank God that exists. And I believe in landscape architects who might be a one-person firm who does a little design and his whole profession is built out of $150,000 projects, right? What happens when you grow is that you just panic about all the people you need to take care of. I don't know how else to say it. If you think that I don't think every single day about my financial responsibility to care for my 38 people, I do. And I'm sure Chris, I'm sure you guys think about it every day. So we're not working in the, oh shit, we gotta get this done. We're working in the, oh shit, we gotta get this done, and where the hell is the rest of the work? And so we're doing both at the same time, right? It's easy for us to fire somebody, but it's not easy for us to fire somebody. We don't wake up with a goal that we lose teams or staff. Not particularly when we have a magnificent team, which is what I happen to be blessed with right now, a magnificent team. So in understanding your client's budget, I know that a lot of the landscape architects will do budgets on their projects. Do all of the landscape architects in this room do budgets on their projects before they're released? Right. And when you do those budgets on those projects, can I ask, are you involving your landscapers on those budgets in any way? Because obviously, here's what's happened from a construction standpoint. We've gone up 57% since pre-COVID. That's the answer. 57%. How much has landscape gone up since pre-COVID? What's the number?
Yeah, I don't know the exact number. But
It would be great to know that exact number. You actually could probably do a little math and figure it out. So that when you as a landscape architect are using a number that you used 3.5 years ago, you're using an accurate number. And then the other thing that happens is it depends upon where you build. So let me give you some idea of what I mean by that. If you're in New York City, you're $2,000 a square foot. If you're in Long Island, you're probably $1,500 to $2,000 a square foot. If you're in Connecticut, you're $2,000 a square foot. If you're in Boston, you're between $1,000 to $2,000 a square foot. If you're in Washington, D.C., you can be between $700 and $1,500 a square foot. If you're in Annapolis, you're going to be somewhere around, depending on what you do, $550 to $1,000 a square foot. If you're down at Kitty Hawk, who knows where the hell Kitty Hawk is? You know what? I couldn't believe that I sat there with a builder, nice guy, he's going to build a house. He's going to build a house we're doing down there. And I said, well, up in our neighborhood, it would probably be X. He goes, oh, no, we do that stuff down here for $300 a square foot. Well, the challenge for me is, and I appreciate that you said that, you probably shouldn't have said it in front of the client, because here's why. Because what we know is the only variable is labor costs. It's not materials. When I got a big project out in Nebraska, a really big project, 16,000 square foot house, I thought for myself, for sure, I was going to a place that was like going to be, not, $700,000 a square foot. Oh, they're probably building out there $400 a square foot. Damn no. Same damn cost as the Washington, D.C. area, and yet we're out in the middle of the cornfield next to the National Airport, right? You never would have thought it. The only variable is labor, and if the only variable is labor, you can't adjust something by 50%. So if I'm 700 square foot in Washington DC on the low side, how can you possibly perform something at $300 square foot unless you're really not paying your people pittance? You know, it's just impossible for me mathematically to get there. I will share a funny story just because I think all my masons in the room, do I have any masons in this room? Not my landscapers? I do. You're going to love this story. Had a client from Texas 16 years ago, Eastern Shore project, doing a renovation. Pretend it was $1.5 million renovation back then 16 years ago. And he said, Cathy, he had 2 houses, one in Texas, one on the Eastern Shore. He obviously drove fancy cars. He stood next to me, he said, Cathy, I'm thinking about redoing the stone steps in front. What do you think that would cost? And this is 16 years ago. I said, I don't know, but I'm going to guess it's going to be more than $6,000. All it was a pad and 3 steps down. $6,000! Oh my God, I'm not going to do it for $6,000. I said, you know what I know? My masons don't own 2 cars. My masons don't have 2 houses. $6,000 is the right number, if that's what they say it is. Because they're the ones sitting out there in the 40-degree temperature or 50-degree temperature trying to do the work. They're not making any money, so if you don't want to do it, you don't have to do it. But you're not going to find somebody to do it cheaper. Yes, that is me. So that's kind of the way I feel. I'm still loved by my clients, but I get away with that shit. Okay, this is probably one that's so true for us. This is not specific to other firms. So I have a very driven team because I drive it. So a lot of my team, we are a firm that we put, if you don't ask an architect and a landscape architect to put a schedule, they'll draw for freaking forever. We are notorious for pretty drawing. And we can draw. And the funny thing is, it was about 4 years ago, I was interviewing a man in his 60s in Charlottesville because he wanted to come join the firm as an architect. I said, have you ever kept your time? No. Wait a minute. You're telling me you've never kept your time? No. Wait a minute. You're telling me you have no timekeeping system? No. How do you manage your work? We just draw until it's done. How do you know that you're making $5 an hour? This is what architects are notorious for. Drawing for forever, not knowing how much time they spend, not paying attention to their contracts and budget, and just drawing. And then you get absolutely no deliverables. This is like you're beating on people to get the work out of them. We run the company that every project that comes in the door, regardless of the client, gets mapped out onto a schedule. And all of those projects and all those schedules are on a complete project schedule list so that we know when we're going into our 5 QCs, because we have 5 interjected QCs in our development process, when they need to meet those deliverables and when we need to deliver. It isn't about, oh my God, we said it was going to be May the 25th, we're submitting for permit. It isn't that things don't change based on what a client does, but if a client doesn't impact that date, and if we're the ones who choose it, then we're going to make it within 5 days. Because we're not going to not be of our word. So if I stand in front of a client and say, I did it last night, I was with a client, and she said, well, where do you think we are in the process? And right in front of her, I mocked out the timing, I mapped out the civil, I backed up the civil grading permit to the architect as to when I need to deliver, and I said, we're filing for a permit on May the 1st. Because I need to be out by June the 1st, I need to be out by June the 15th, and I only take 1 review. The grading permit always takes 3 reviews, if you guys didn't know that. That's why grading permits in Anne Arundel County take approximately 4 months, 4.5 months. 3 reviews. Each review is a 30-day review. So you have to be on top of your civil engineer to get him to turn his comments around pretty fast. Okay. So deliverables in a sense of urgency, this is really important to me. So we have a really big project. And that project, we have a really big project. And, where did I lose my train of thought? I was thinking about a project that's in Annapolis. It's on the 7 acres on Harness Creek Road. And that one probably took 2 more months on landscape, on the grading permit issuance. And I hate to say it, it's because it's COVID and Kelly sat on the agreements. So it took her forever to get these agreements out and finalized with the client by our civil engineer. And I think if I were to say what kind of happens or has happened, so you guys understand, each jurisdiction does or does not, when I say jurisdiction, I'm talking about the zoning department, the health department, the building department. Each jurisdiction does or does not police by time commitment their reviews, okay? So in Anne Arundel County, they have 3 weeks to do a building permit review and put everything into the system. If on 3 weeks and 1 day I don't have it in the system, I can reach out to the department head and say I don't have my comments. What a lot of professionals will end up doing is not actually telling anybody you can do that, and they say, I'm still waiting for the letter. I'm still waiting for the letter. I haven't gotten the letter from the county. Well, if you wait to get a letter from the county, you might wait another 60 days. Because hell's going to freeze over before you get it out. Talbot County Health Department has 0 time frame, meaning as much time as they want to get you out of septic on approval. We've had projects go a year and a half to get that project to come out with the 7. We have a project up in the Hamptons where we've been waiting 3 months for one man named Marty. Marty comes out to the property and flags arbitrarily. Marty's not a professional. He flags arbitrarily where he thinks the new wetland line is. He's not a professional. He's Marty. And if you piss Marty off, he will not respond. So he's actually being sued personally right now by several wealthy people in the Hamptons who are sick of Marty having that kind of authority, right? Because nobody should have that kind of authority. Nobody. Everybody on our side and everybody on that side should be held responsible to when you get your comments back, right? So from a civil standpoint, they have 4 weeks of a review. So ours is a 3, theirs is a 4. So if you don't have comments by 4 weeks in 1 day, pick up the phone, because they are obligated, and you can get a department chair to go down on people who are not responding. And I think what made it difficult and even worse is when COVID happened, all of our county professionals went home. And then they went home for a year longer than we were all at home, right, or whatever, a year longer. And then that whole mentality of just, I'm going to get to it when I get to it, has happened. And so we're dealing with, if you're specifically in Anne Arundel County, we are certainly dealing with a lot of that, which is we've kind of lost that commitment of deliverable, but you can go higher up to put pressure when you need to, okay? But why this is important to me is because if my work is hinged with the landscape architect, here's why. I love my landscape architect to do my buffer management plans. I do not love my civil engineer to do them, although I'm okay with them doing them if we need to fast file, knowing that we're going to change. That's a timing issue. If I can't get out of the landscape architect what I need fast enough, then the civil will drop something in, we'll file so we can get a file, and then we'll have to go back to obviously manage that. But in an ideal world, my landscape architects are doing that buffer management plan for the civil engineer, and obviously being a part of that. And for me, the challenge is timing. So like, I need things to move. It's my personality, but I also need things to move to keep clients happy, okay? Who besides architects, oh, I'm sure all of you do, does the landscape profession clients get frustrated with timing? They do. And when they do, is it because they thought you were going to be here last week and you're not coming now for another 4 weeks? Or is it more that it's taking longer than I thought? Okay. And obviously I know sometimes it's weather related, but that's under control as well. So again, stepping back, for me, the best thing you can do is have open, clear communication with your clients and all parties on the same communication. I'm a big believer that I don't care if there's 6 of us on the copy line, everybody needs to be on the copy line. We're working with a group out of Long Island right now, and every single time they email, they cut everybody off. And then we have to pick them back up and pick up the other 6 people and say, please pick them up and keep them on the copy line. And then they drop everybody off again. It's a generational thing. I don't know what the hell it is. But there comes a point where I'll pick up the phone and say, you got to copy all because we're not going to keep doing this housekeeping. We need everybody to be aware of what's going on in the country. We think the most successful project comes that way. Obviously Kevin's sitting there a little uncomfortable. That's your project, darling. It's a magnificent project. Kevin happens to be a very favorite person of mine, just so you guys know. I'm going to tell you why in a second. Leave your ego at the door. That is why Kevin is one of my favorite people. Because that man will move in any way that needs to move. Right? That's what's so great. He might do something, and he might think that it's important and it's beautiful and he cares, but he's also willing to go this way, and he's also willing to go this way. He's always willing to change the way he thinks. You don't typically find that in this profession. You don't typically find it in the architecture profession. You frequently don't find it in the interior design profession. And obviously you don't always find it, rarely, probably less, in the landscape architect profession. We, in our office in Charlottesville, there's a couple of landscape firms down there. And so you know, Planet Earth is down there. Let me tell you why you all boys need to be down there.
You should have done this when Frank was here.
I should have. Here's why. Because there's something about Charlotte. Who knows Charlottesville? Raise your hand. Great. Perfect. Beautiful place. Where I have just built my final home. Love the area. Love the diversity. Love the food. Love the music. Love everything about it. Love it. Love the mountains. It's stunning. But for some reason, it being kind of like this island in a sea of agriculture, other than its slight connection over to Richmond, it has evolved to a place where you're either trust fund kids, or you're wealthy people who have made wealth, or you're just normal people. The catch is, the trust fund kids don't really have any sense of, not all of them, I shouldn't generalize, but 80% of them don't have any sense of cost, don't really care what the cost is, just want to get the approval, but want it done yesterday, right? The contractors have learned down there, they are 20% higher than here. Because they don't have competition. Their competition isn't coming out of Waynesboro because it's a different sector. Their competition is not coming out of North and South. And most of the people who work in Richmond actually don't even come over into Charlottesville. So you have this whole network of trades and subs and design professionals who kind of can call their own rules. And oh my gosh, you get so tired of waiting for, oh, I was promised something next week, and now 2 weeks later, when am I getting it? Oh, well, I haven't gotten it yet. Oh, I'm going on vacation, I'm going to Europe, I'll be back, and this is a landscape architecture firm. I'm going on my 8th vacation for the year. I won't be back until 2 weeks from now. I'll get to it then. And then you try to get the work done. So my landscape architect and the landscape team now, Planet Earth, has come to Charlottesville. Because I can't do my work the way we perform, and I'm not willing to dumb down. And I would also say why I say leave your ego at the door. I know as design professionals we get hung up on something. I don't think I've ever gotten hung up on a design thing, have I? But it's not unusual for me to sit next to Kevin and go, I'm not doing that. You think I'm getting up in the morning, put my slippers on, walking 200 feet to go get my shit? Are you kidding me? right? Whatever it is about whatever, right? Because I'm always thinking spatially and timing and logistics and ease and how the family works, and I know nothing about plant material. Zero. So I will always need a talented landscape architecture firm in my life. Okay, I think that, okay, collaborate with the architect on the significant views from the inside. This is probably the piece that to me is really incredibly important. And it's also important to understand that in the Revit world, which I know that Kevin understands, in the Revit world, you actually can see all your through views. So like we can go into our model and see that we're looking down a 175-foot hole out a big window that I put on the long view, because I believe in I actually believe in interior windows. So my house, which Chris has been to his wife 1 month, I have a 195-degree mountain range that does this, and it's 7 mountain ranges deep here. And I got it by removing 8 acres of 40 to 60 foot tall trees on a hill going down. And that's how I got it. And my house wasn't designed to go long, so that each room had an independent partial view. My house went perpendicular to that view, and my end room is glass on the 3 sides. So my kitchen, my family room, my dining room, and my art studio all see that mountain range all the way across. And my art studio has a 9-foot wide, 5-foot tall interior window, so that I can be in my art studio, look through that big window to that entire view that my dining room sees. So I believe in views in a big way. And I've come to realize when I've added on 2 lead designers, one lead designer is from Chicago, very talented, love him as a part of the team. One lead designer is from New York, also very talented. It's amazing to have watched over the last 1.5 years. They actually didn't come from view properties at all. It's not their fault. One was working in New York, so you're not really going to be working on view properties. And the other one is in Chicago, where you've got a foot side yard before the next house. And so it was interesting to watch early on in their very talented design, hired so that they replace me. In their very talented work, it was interesting to watch that in their schematic level, they're still working interior. And so over that evolution of the 1.5 years, no, you can put a whole wall of windows, but in their worlds and their environments that they came from, that wasn't what they were used to. They've now got it now after having been with us for 1.5 years, but they had never had that opportunity. And for me, I didn't realize that all of our projects, believe it or not, 98% of them are about views in whatever way it is. So I think this is where the landscape architect brings their greatest talent forward, not only making a beautiful outcome, but also understanding what's the significant thing to be seen through a significant placement of whatever window or view it is. So I think that what's great about bringing the landscape architect on early, obviously, is having them engage in understanding those views. I'm thinking about a big project we're doing on the Eastern Shore, and all of us standing there at the same time and going like this and saying, well, so we think we need to, well, I would do this because, you know, and this is what sets our rotation on our house. Because we're collectively together deciding where the landscape architect might be thinking about the surroundings, and the architect is inside the home going, well, that's not going to work because I got a wall over here. Landscape architect doesn't know that, which is fine. But collaboratively working together in order to create that outcome is, to me, the best thing. Okay, so that's us. So anybody have any questions? What do you want to ask at the purple chair? Nothing? Go.
You talked about with your long range plan for your company, how you dropped your first name, grooming people. I dropped my first name for my business, and it's a long range plan. So I'm just curious, like, how that process has all worked, when did that first seed begin for you?
Okay. How big are you?
7 people.
Okay. A little bit of a different strategy,
Yeah.
which is fine. But for me, what I wanted to accomplish, it was very specific. So I have a very strong business mind. So anybody who knows me knows I am a strong businesswoman, and then I'm also a very strong designer, see three-dimensional, etc. So I kind of have both brains. My mother was a performing artist and an artist. My father was an aeronautical engineer. So I got both of those. my greatest concern was rainmaking. I'm not concerned about, if you're a firm and you're a local firm, then you won't be and you're smaller scale, you'll have a different dynamic. Like if I was 9 people and transitioning 9 people, my brain wouldn't be worrying about where are they getting their next project from. Because as long as you have strength and presence within a community or within a region, you'll be okay. Although I will tell you what's really important for me, guys. It's really important for me that you serve in a philanthropic way. And it's really more important to me that you serve in a board position. I started serving on boards when I first got out of college. And then I did nothing but serve on boards, 7 different boards over the 25 years, 30 years of my profession. And why it's so important, so you hear it specifically from me, is it gives you the ability to learn how to communicate. It tells you how to socialize. It tells you when you get to learn when you're 27 years old about how benefits work. Because you're sitting on a board for a nonprofit organization, you have to review, you're having to do a strategic master plan for that or whatever. You're reviewing your benefits every year, and this is shit that most people never get exposed to. So I care about how my team garners that information. I've sadly seen a really big change in the last 25 years, in my opinion, and I work with it with my team all the time, which is that pre-computers, we had to get our asses out of the house. We were going to design lectures and events and anything we could, because that was our only way of networking, that was our only way of communicating, that was our only way of growing and learning and being exposed. Now it's like, I'm at work, I go home, I've got the gym and I Netflix, right? Or I Instagram. And so here you've got Cathy, 10 years ago, if you look at my wall, you might see 40 certificates of thanks for my involvement in low-income housing in Annapolis, for my involvement in Pearl Town Center. These were all design charrettes that I led, that I participated in, that I did as value back to communities. I remember being at the Chamber of Commerce breakfast in the morning. Here I was like 3 people, and I was one of those people who stood up and said, "Hi, I'm Cathy Cherry, architect." And I said, "Yeah, right." I think about those things. I think it's important that you do all of them, because they all give you a skill set. The difference is for you and me is I have 38 people. I can't employ 38 people with local regional work. I must be national. So the biggest lift, this is actually being published by a publisher. The book comes out in June. It is not a self-published book. It was picked up by a publisher. My goal was national branding. To do that, you have to believe in advertising. Okay? So if you ask me, how much should we spend between in-house staffing and out-house, I can spend anywhere from $500,000 to $1.5 million in money, doing nothing but that reach, that print ad, that visual. You never one-off advertise, doesn't work. Because if you're never sending something out for a single job, you're always branding. So when you advertise, ideally, if you have the ability, it's a full-page ad, 12-month commitment. And once you start doing that, you will see that the branding then follows. So that started 15, 20 years ago. In the last 5 years, I recognized it was so interesting when we started the transition, and I'd have a few people say, "What do you think your strengths are?" Well, they might have expressed all their strengths, and really their strength was one of the 5 things, right? So it's like, yes, I'm a strong designer, and yes, and this is not a slight on them. It's about them understanding their own strengths. So now I had to hire in. The team was all on board with recognizing those holes once they were educated on what their strengths were. And now what I have is a really strong team. And then the other thing is ownership goes to nobody. Like the ownership is not my lead designers, the ownership is not Cathy Cherry's. The ownership is the 7 people who worked on the project, but technically the 38 people that are in the firm, because without those 38 people, that firm doesn't run. So that's the ownership of all product. So I would think of, and then the last piece is ultimately you hire a transition consultant. Okay? And then the last, kind of in closing, this sounds so stupid because I'll go off in left field, but in 2026, January 1st, what happens?
Tired?
What?
Tired?
What'd you say?
Tired?
No, but that's a good thought. I hope so. Does anybody know what happens on January 1st, 2026? You all, I'm not surprised y'all don't know, but I have to share it so you know. Your inheritance gifting to your children cuts in half. 1/2. So from now till January 21st, 2026, and for the past probably 20 years, we've had inheritance law that allows you to gift a certain amount of money to your children. That number is cutting in half. Period. That's a shitload of money. Right now it's 24 million, roughly. It goes back to 12, still a shitload of money. But if you think you're hovering somewhere, based on what you might do, you better start gifting it. Kevin Camping. Gift it to me. Okay. I don't know if that helped answer your question. You're welcome to call me, reach out to me. I'm happy to kind of connect you with. When you work with the transition consultant, who actually does the valuation, okay? When you work with the valuation company, you always want to work with a company that specializes in the industry.
It's a 15-year.
Oh, no, I don't want that for you. I just always said if I'm 60 years old and sitting in HPC meetings in downtown Annapolis, you need to shoot me. So I don't do them anymore. Alan does them. And Alan's like 54. So, no other questions. You're all good. You're good. Next.